Muted. Welcome. I'm feeling much better and sound much better than I did last week, so I'm thankful for that. And spring is here finally. That's good news. If you're able to turn your cameras on so that I can see your lovely faces, I would appreciate it. And so plan for today is just to do a little bit of digging into the ABC analysis more. I know I've gotten a couple of questions from folks regarding making that distinction between hostile aggression and instrumental aggression. So we're going to do some practicing with the actual document. So this will serve you in helping you to get a good chunk of the assignment completed. We are going to work through that together, and I apologize. I'm just kind of like looking at a couple of things at one time. Okay, so first of all, I want to kind of just review these 4 types of aggression that we touched on last time. Are y'all able to see that? I don't really see. Okay, yeah. So there were 4 major types of aggression that we see in young children. Accidental, which is obviously unintentional, happens just kind of in the process of play or moving throughout the classroom. Expressive aggression, this is when a pleasurable sensory experience for the aggressor, such as biting or hitting, inadvertently hurts another child, right? So it's not necessarily with malicious intent. Apologize, my microphone wasn't turned on. It doesn't have malicious intent behind it. It's the child moving their body through space to get their own sensory input, and in the process they inflict pain or cause injury to another child. So the 2 that are presenting confusion are number 3 and number 4. Instrumental aggression. This involves disputes over property, territory, or rights with no premeditation or deliberate intent to do harm. So the key there is understanding, really, this is a child trying to enter into or sustain play with other children and being aggressive in that context, right? Whereas hostile aggression is the actual goal here is just to inflict physical or psychological pain. It's used to make another child feel more powerful, but it's really got sort of a different motivation behind it. It is the term that we would refer to this in is bullying. And so it is more of just deliberate actions intended to hurt another person. Where instrumental aggression, and I think what's confusing about it is, so if you see an example, we're going to look at the actual ABC log that's posted to the course page. But if you look at an example where it says, like example number 1, Jay is building a car with Legos, B takes one of Jay's Lego pieces, that's pretty obviously going to be instrumental aggression when Jay aggresses over the Lego pieces, right? But there are some that come up a little further down where there are no materials involved. And so it's that dispute over territory or rights in the classroom. Again, no premeditation or deliberate intent to do harm. It's just the child, sort of defending themselves or trying to assert themselves. And that's also instrumental aggression. So it's a little difficult to tease those 2 apart. Does anyone have specific questions or thoughts on like the difference between the 2 or how to tease them
Yeah,
up?
I do.
Okay.
Like I know that there were a couple because like I kind of like did that. I was like the intent behind like him hurting someone, like, and there were some times where it was caused by instrumental, but I think it ended up being hostile. So I always kind of did those as hostile because that was the end action. Like that was what the action ended in, was him being hostile. It was like, oh, they were playing with the balls and he someone like took away his ball, but like I don't, that's not even a good example because that would be just straight instrumental. But there were, I feel like, examples where it was like kind of a little bit of both, where like his intent was, hey, I'm gonna attack or like hurt you
Yeah.
so that you don't do that again. Like intentionally, I'm gonna hurt you to stop that, rather than being like, hey, I just want my toy back.
Right.
Could that just kind of go both ways? Because I know like when I did all of mine, I was like, I feel like they were more instrumental and hostile than like the other two.
Yes, there
Okay.
are definitely, so I will say in the ABC log that you have, the majority of them are instrumental. There are, it looks like on the answer key that I'm looking at, there's only one that's truly hostile. Does everyone have that? Let's see. I only have page 1. Let me open it up for you guys. But yeah, so I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think though the way you have to distinguish it in your mind is that if the initial reaction was over materials, you know, to defend materials, to assert themselves in order to get materials, or to defend themselves in the classroom or assert themselves in the classroom, then it's still going to be looked at as instrumental, even if the end result appears more hostile. Because hostile aggression, remember, is not premeditated. There's really no provocation, and there's nothing done on the part of the other children to kind of invite hostility or aggression from the other child. So let me see if I can show you. Can you all see this now? Number 21 right here, where it's got children are all gathered at the gate, getting their coats and preparing to go inside for lunch. D is lying on the ground. J, smiling, begins to kick D. That is hostile aggression because it is unprovoked. D has done nothing to, you know, engage with J at all, and J goes over and begins kicking D. Now, there's, let's see. I mean, there are a lot that my initial reaction is hostile, and then I have to think about, but is it really? So number 2 is an example of this. K is making a noise and J says, stop making that silly noise. K continues. J hits K with a spoon. What's your initial reaction?
Hostile.
Hostile, because the intent seems like it's, you know, just to hurt K. But really, if you think about in terms of rights in the classroom, J has made a request for quiet during, you know, whatever, I guess, mealtime, or at least for the cessation of the noise, right? That doesn't happen. And so in an effort to assert himself or herself, to get that noise to stop, J aggresses. So it's actually instrumental in that J is trying to achieve a goal, right? It's not just random aggression. Do you see the distinction there? Number 4, J and B are playing freeze tag. B tells J he cannot be the unfreezer. J runs towards B and kicks him in the leg. Same thing here, you know, it feels hostile, but it's actually Jay trying to be instrumental, right, in achieving a goal. And what's the goal for Jay?
To be the unfreezer.
Yeah, he wants to play a certain part, you know, play a certain role in the game. And so to assert himself towards that end, he uses aggression. All right, so we'll come back to this. Let's shift gears again back to the PowerPoint. Because I do think, you know, it's important to be able to make these distinctions. And from your perspective, why is it important to be able to distinguish among these different types of aggression? What are your thoughts on that?
It'll change the type of guidance you use.
It could certainly change the type of guidance you use. Although remember last week, you know, we need to make it very clear to children that aggression is never okay. Now with accidental aggression, you're certainly going to treat that differently, I think, than you would treat any of the other three, because the reality of life is that accidents happen, right? And oftentimes, even as an adult, when I'm moving my body through space, you know, I may crash into people and or things. And so we are not going to address that in quite the same way. But expressive aggression, you know, acting out of our own needs and inflicting pain on another person is still not okay, you know? So we are going to guide the behavior, but it's certainly going to change you know, the nuances of how we address the behavior. And also I think you know, particularly in this expressive, instrumental, and hostile aggression situation, it's very important to address the victim first. In accidental aggression, there is a victim, but it's really not, it's not the same dynamic there as, you know, getting hurt in these other instances. So and both children could need, you know, attention and care at the same time when an accident has occurred. What other thoughts do you have on why is it important to, especially this distinction between number 3 and number 4? You know, number 4 is really kind of a separate issue. Number 3, instrumental aggression, is a direct result of children not having the skills in place to, you know, achieve their goals in the classroom, to get their needs met, to be able to successfully enter and sustain play with other children. Instrumental aggression is used in the place of executive functioning and higher level thinking that children develop over time, right? That's why it's, you know, typical behavior of young children. Hostile aggression is kind of not that, you know. Hostile aggression is coming from a place of malintent toward others, and the goal there is to inflict pain. And so again, you know, when we look at the range of typical aggression for young children, instrumental aggression, yes, happens often, and our job there is to support children in developing skills to replace that aggression. Hostile aggression, sometimes yes, you know, but when there is a pattern of hostile behavior toward other children, that's really more of a red flag to me than instrumental aggression, because I expect to see instrumental aggression happening with young children. It's just part of the deal, you know. Just to draw your attention to a resource that's posted to the course page, there's an article called Helping Children Resolve Conflict. And I think you can see that now. It's just like 2 pages, I think, but it breaks down these different types of aggression and gives some strategies for how to, you know, kind of manage them. again, the distinction here is made between instrumental and hostile aggression. So the language here, they've got this word unprovoked and illogical. Unprovoked is bolded. That may help you in terms of thinking through how to make the distinction between instrumental and hostile aggression. So I think it's fair to make the blanket statement that if you can see or can determine any provocation that invited aggression in the A column, you're going to call it instrumental rather than hostile in the B column. Does that make sense? So even like I'm looking at, let me see. J number, it's line 9 if you're still looking at that document. J is getting ready for nap. K and E laugh at him for some reason. J pushes E down on her cot and slaps K. My initial instinct is to say, wow, that's hostile aggression, but it's actually instrumental, right? Because it was provoked by the other children laughing at J. And so in an effort to, establish his rights or defend himself, that is why he reacted in that way. Questions on this at this point?
Yeah.
It's clear.
When I was doing this, I had the exact opposite thing. I had like so many hostiles, I guess, just because I was doing like the opposite of this. When I seen like the rights or the territory thing, I was just kind of going for hostile. But I could only find like one of accidental and one of expressive, and I was just wondering if that was kind of the common thing in there, or if there should have been more of those.
No, largely instrumental, and then maybe 1 or 2 of the other kinds, but almost everything in the document is going to be instrumental.
Cool.
And so, if we were doing this in real life on a child, that's actually good news, right? Because it tells us that we're not just dealing with, a bully or a child who has major aggressive feelings towards other people. Like we can help guide this behavior more easily probably than we can guide it if it's hostile. Because he just needs tools and strategies to help him with talking through his conflicts rather than aggressing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this right now? Okay. So you also have available to you on the course page a Word document that is called ABC Observation Practice Handout. It looks like this as it's opening. Oh. Okay, Zoom won't let me share it until it opens. Give me 1 sec. So if you are able to open this document for ABC Observation Practice, because to me, it's as important, if not more important, in terms of understanding what type of aggression it is. Yes, important, but figuring out what's the function of the behavior for the child. And they're kind of interrelated, right? So like, why is the child engaging in this behavior? That's what we need to understand in order to know how to make shifts in the behavior. Because if it's, to get materials or to negotiate whatever in the classroom, that gives us information that we can help, we can use to help the child. If it's to get attention, we can also use that information to respond to the behavior in a different way, or to be proactive in offering positive attention to the child so they don't necessarily need to engage in those types of behaviors, right? So as important as it is to know what kind of aggression we're looking at, we also really need to know Why is it happening? Let's do some practice then with this. So we're going to watch a short video clip and then do some practice with that document in looking at what came first, what was the behavior, what was the consequence, and then kind of trying to figure out what's the function of the behavior. Can you all see, am I sharing anything? No. Okay.
She's scared because Lana and I I'm coming. Stop doing that. Yeah, it's black. It's on my shoulder.
All right, so do we need to watch it one more time? Or do you think you've got what you need in regards to the fella in the red shirt? What was the behavior? If we call him child A, what was the behavior that we see in this interaction from child A?
Initially, he was like rolling the truck towards the other children in the room, and like seemed like he was sticking his tongue out and kind of like making, I don't really know how to describe the like noise he was
Raspberry
making.
noise, right?
Yeah, and he was kind of like doing that towards them, almost like in an effort to get their attention.
Mhm. Yep.
Before he like was then became like physical with the other boy nearby.
Yes. And that would be exactly what I would assume with that noise making and, you know, trying to enter into their play area. Function of that behavior was, you know, does he want attention? Is he trying to play with them? Right. With, again, kind of a lack of, you know, appropriate skills. He hit the child on the back when he was not noticed from the noise making. Right. And then scratches the child on the back, the other boy. So what was happening antecedent wise is that several children are playing during free play in the block area. Child A is playing alone with the truck and he's watching the other children play. Then we saw the behavior of the making the spitting noise, hitting and scratching, right? And then the consequence was the child that got hit on the back turned around and said, "Stop doing that." And then the other child kind of, you know, mimicked that and said, "Stop doing that." And child B said to the teacher, "He hurt my shoulder," or to an adult, we assume, but no one intervened, right? So that's kind of what you would assess as consequence. And so what type of aggression would this be? Instrumental, because the goal is to enter, yeah, that's fine, to enter into play or to, you know, engage with those other children. We can clearly see that that was kind of the intent of the behavior, not unprovoked random violence, right? All right, let's do one more.
I didn't have a Coke. Wow. Is that better? Let me try it now, baby.
So what would you write in the behavior column here? What did we see child A, fella in the red shirt, doing?
We saw child A going for a toy that was already being occupied and played with. And when child B would hand over the toy, we saw them begin to like get physically aggressive and start to like push and pull and trying to get that toy.
Yes. Basically everything that was just said. And remember, when you're doing these observations, you know, you would have the ability to pause. If you have this on video data, you would have the ability to pause, go back, review, so that you could be as specific and objective as possible, right? So it should sound something like child A pushes on child B's face, or puts hands on child B's face to push her away, and she doesn't let go of the toy. Both children fall to the ground. They're still struggling for the truck. Child A pushes on child B's face again, right? Again, looking at the function of the behavior, we can clearly see either he wants the toy and that's what he's going for, the toy's being used, or, you know, perhaps is struggling with that playing together, turn taking idea, which is really similar to wanting the toy and not having the skills to properly get it, right? And so again, what type of aggression is this?
I would say instrumental.
Instrumental.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, sorry, my camera's off. My Wi-Fi is really weird, and whenever I turn on my camera, it like logs me out of the Zoom. So
No, I understand that happens sometimes. Thank you. And so antecedent, what came first? Pretty basic. Children are playing outside. Child A sees child B playing with a toy near the sand area. Child A walks over to child B. Then we saw the behavior, right? And the consequence here was different than in the first video, because the consequence was that a teacher did come over to the children. She squatted down, put her arm around child A, asked what is going on. There's a moment where you can't really hear what they say, but then the child takes the toy, gives it back to the child it was taken from, and removes child A from that area, right? Okay, so can you see slide C right here, or item C? Okay, so if I go ahead and tell you that the majority of what you're going to see in the ABC log is instrumental aggression, right? We've basically established that. Let's talk now about what are some possibilities for, you know, why that might be happening. What are the potential factors contributing to Jay's negative behaviors in the classroom?
My first thought is always the development. Like, is he ready to communicate with the other kids? Does he understand the process of sharing, like what the social construct is of the like the whole process of that?
Yeah.
Like, does he know how to ask for a turn or anything like that?
So lots of stuff under the social and emotional piece, right? That we can pretty clearly assume is happening for Jay. What about environment? What might be happening in the environment that could contribute to all of this aggression related to materials and negotiating materials?
I think that what I noticed is a lot of like the instrumental, like in our assignment, like the instrumental aggression took place during free time. So like teachers weren't necessarily supervising as much, like right there with him, like if they were at nap time or outdoor play, like there wasn't ever really a like he never got snippy with teachers. He respected his like authority figure, but environmentally, like there was just less supervision. So he was more likely to act like, I guess, maybe test the boundary of that. Because whenever a teacher was like around or interacting with them, like you didn't see many of those. It was like accidental or things like that.
Right. So lack of supervision could very well be an environmental factor. Anything else that you know from, our conversation about environments, what we know about child development? There may not be enough materials in the room. Someone put that into the chat, and that's the other idea that I'm getting at, is that either there isn't enough to go around successfully, right? Or there isn't enough support during free play. Those are likely the two environmental causes. When we think about interactions, it's important to look at like patterns of behavior, right? So we see J, and then we see child called B coming up pretty frequently in this document, right? There tends to be a fair amount of aggression towards B. C comes up a lot. Maybe K. I think K is mentioned a few times. But basically, if I'm the teacher in that classroom and I've got this type of data to support, what I know is kind of going on as a pattern of behavior, what does that tell me that I need to do in terms of my interactions or helping J and B and K and C navigate their interactions? I need to keep a close eye on that, right? And I need to make sure that my body placement is, close to them when they're playing together, because I already know there's likely going to be conflict, and someone, is probably going to be aggressed towards. And so I just need to go ahead and cut that off at the pass and be there ready for that to happen. And again, remember the pyramid that we've talked about this whole semester. That sort of anticipating what might happen, that's a key piece of that foundational part of the pyramid, or somewhere in the middle at least, and that way we're not necessarily having to go to the top of the pyramid where we're dealing with challenging behavior, because we are anticipating it happening and we're already there to kind of help support the play. Let's think about physical and intellectual. Physical, what ideas do you have there? What do we know about? Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know if it was quite what you were looking for with like just the word physical, but I said that Jake could either be like the smallest kid in the room and like trying to, like assert that he's still like has a part in the classroom, or he could be the biggest kid in the classroom and maybe, these random like
Right.
instrumental violent acts are just becoming what could be a shuffle or going a little out of hand, or maybe he doesn't understand how much bigger he is than these other kids.
Right. Yeah, it could certainly be related to his physical stature. Also, when I think about the physical piece, especially I think it's fair to say for all young children, children need big body input and they need big body output, right? So children who are not, getting the opportunity to use their body in the ways that they need to, from a very basic physical development standpoint, they might be acting out with more aggression because they don't have that outlet, right? So considering, does our daily routines support enough outdoor time? Are they getting heavy work when they're outside, like pulling wagons, pushing tractors, all of that type of stuff? That's also a factor, as well as what Maddie mentioned with physical stature and, just sort of navigating place in the classroom. And what about intellectual? Think about materials, curriculum, that type of thing. When you think about the intellectual piece, what could possibly be going on? We talked about this when we talked about, setting up environments for children, but if the environment itself is not stimulating enough, or the classroom curriculum is not stimulating enough, rather than children being in a play area and being engaged in what they're working with, they're kind of randomly moving throughout the room. They're not really digging in and doing, heavy engagement in the classroom. And that could be a contributing factor, right? Lots of moving through the classroom, lack of cognitive or intellectual engagement. And that could certainly contribute to seeing challenging behaviors. And there could be other issues under intellectual too. I'm just trying to get you thinking. All right, so another challenge to the task then is, we've sort of mentioned this idea here under C, that there are patterns with specific children, right? But we also want to make sure that we're looking for patterns in time of day, as well as patterns in the setting. Someone mentioned that they noticed a lot of this aggression happening during free play. And so that's important to key in on, right? Because there were a couple instances, I know one I mentioned of, a mealtime aggression or nap time aggression, but largely speaking, our issues are happening during free play, it seems like. And so, understanding that part of the pattern can be helpful in helping us determine, what do we do next. And so these are all coming from the document that you're supposed to complete. And then, has anyone given thought to the specific suggestions that you would offer to a teacher in the classroom?
The suggestion that I made was like, I noticed that they would talk like about what he did wrong in a group setting. Like the teachers, at least, like, it didn't specify. A lot of them were like, and then the teacher told them, this is why we don't do that there. But like pulling the kid aside and sitting him down. I know whenever I'm at Lucy Broadcut's, what they do is they have an area where they're like, hey, this is the talking chair. We're going to go talk about why this is wrong, like why you can't do that. And like that really works with the kids a lot. So I think, just like I said, pulling him aside and sitting down and being like, hey, here's why we can't do that, and like explaining to him and having a conversation and like asking why,
Right.
I thought would be like it seemed like a good compromise for him, because he seemed to listen to the teachers, but like that individualized like relationship and conversation, I think, would be really beneficial to him.
Yeah. And I think, when I heard you describing that, it's language is kind of like, that's not nice, we don't kick people. It's almost like that idea of offering praise versus encouragement, where it's just kind of like you're glossing over what actually happened with the praise piece. It's like, oh, you did so nice. Oh, don't hurt your friends. It's the same kind of idea, right? Because it doesn't really dig in and give that child specific information, clear guidance around, this is what happened, this was the outcome of your behavior, and then here's how we could do it differently next time. And that's really what we need to do with Jay, is to teach him language to use, or other alternatives for when he's not getting what he wants in terms of toys, materials, that type of thing. We need to give him alternatives. And so helping develop those problem solving skills, it really does come from sitting down with the child, developing that language, the toolkit that we've talked about. So yeah, I think that's huge. So when you write out your suggestions, this is really the most critical piece of the ABC analysis, right? So this is why we would even do the documentation and take the notes in the classroom, is so that it can inform our practice as a teacher, and so that we can help, change Jay's behavior for the positive. So give as much thought to this as you can. After you reflect on what might possibly be happening, we want to figure out, how do we make this shift, right? Does anyone else have a suggestion that they would be willing to share? No, that's fair. All right, so I'm opening up the PowerPoint it's actually posted to the asynchronous assignment. But while we're here together, I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights with you. And then you won't really have anything to do for the rest of the week besides, get this ABC analysis completed. And remember, it's due by Sunday at midnight or 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, I guess. And if you will, while I'm thinking of it, if you'll go ahead and type your name into the chat, then I'll have a record of attendance for today while I'm kind of shifting gears here. And so part 3 of kind of thinking through this ABC analysis piece is, where do we go from here? If we have a child who is engaged in challenging behaviors, we're doing this documentation and trying to figure out what are the solutions to this issue. And the reason is because we are going to develop some sort of individualized intervention to help us manage this challenging behavior, right? In the most informal way, establishing a collaborative team is probably going to look like parents and then the center staff that work directly with the child are going to be involved. If you get to a point with a child where that level of intervention is not working to support the child, then you might make a referral to like the CDSA, or depending on the child's age, the public school system early intervention team. And then the collaborative team would grow at that point, a school psychologist or a behavior support analyst, some person who is much more specialized in specifically, helping us to understand challenging behaviors and how to prevent them, might become involved, right? But the process is going to be the same regardless of really what the team looks like. So first and foremost, you're going to establish that team, identify the goals for what needs to happen. Administrative staff, I didn't mention them, but they would also be probably on that potential team. And then, at the beginning of this, we really want everyone working together. We want the family collecting data if the issues are happening at home. Certainly the educational staff in the classroom would be collecting data. If therapists are working with the child, they would also be collecting data. So we want data across settings, right? And that just helps us be more informed kind of about the function of the behavior, and then the type of behavior, etc. So again, we're going to use ABC analysis type of documentation. Anecdotal notes, another great way to get information. There are other types of logs. Sometimes, like for tantruming behavior, you might use a duration log. So you would note the exact amount of time that you observe a certain behavior. There are a variety of tools that could be used, but ABC analysis falls under this step 2 of information gathering. There's an acronym that we use kind of in life. It's KIS, keep it simple. And so basically whatever you choose to use for your documentation, especially when you're having family members and other people who are not, professionals in early childhood or in the school realm doing this work, you want it to be a user-friendly, simple form that anyone can understand and utilize, right? So Likert scale ratings, 1 to 5, checklists, those type of tools are really beneficial. This is a visual to help you just kind of see what's called a home observation card. So this home observation card is basically asking you to give the child's name, the time of day, what's the activity that they're engaged in, describe the challenging behavior. And then again, this is kind of ABC log, right? Because it's asking what happened before, what happened after. So that's your antecedent and your consequence. But it's given to families in a checklist form so that it's a little bit more guided in terms of, helping them complete it. But you would get similar information. And then it does ask families or whomever's filling this out to assess what is the purpose of the behavior. And again, that's helping us figure out functionality of functional behavior analysis. Another example, I'm sorry, this is the back side of the card that's asking for possible influences. And so this is, trying to put a finger on what might be causing the challenging behavior. Could the child be uncomfortable in some sort of way? Are they tired? Are they hungry? All of those things can be a contributing factor. And of course, we can take that information and know, how we might intervene in terms of helping the child manage that. Interviews with families, and this is usually done in the form of like a parent-teacher conference. But this is, my practice as an administrator has always been, if it's typical behavior that we expect to see happening with young children, children are hitting, kicking, scratching, to the extent that it's not interfering with their ability to play successfully with peers, it's not impacting their ability to make friends or, to have a successful day at school, then we handle that at school, right? It's dealt with by the teachers kind of in the moment. We're doing that problem solving conversation with the child, etc. But if we get to a point where it's a pattern of behavior that is impacting their ability to engage in and sustain play with other children, to make friends in the classroom, to have what we would call a successful day at school, then it warrants this, conversation with the family where we sit down and we already have some clear, concrete data to share with them, where we are describing the behavior that we see. We're talking about frequency and intensity. We're, asking the family's input on, are you seeing these things at home? If so, what do you think might be contributing to it? That type of conversation we need to have with families in a formal setting. And I'm very adamant that this does not need to happen at 5:30 when the family is picking their child up after, a day at work and the child's been at school all day. This is time where we carve out an hour into our day to sit down uninterrupted, focused, prepared to have this conversation, right? No one wants to get off work and be met at the door with this type of thing, and it's just not the right time or place. So this is a planned interview with the family that, everyone's kind of on the same page for. And through that interview with family, we would develop, and our data, right? We're going to develop our hypotheses, which is part of what you're doing in your ABC analysis assignment, is looking at what do we think, what's our best educated guess around why is this behavior happening? What's the function of the behavior? And this, out of this, you will develop hypotheses statements. So you're going to be trying to identify potential triggers for the behavior. We want to clearly define and describe what is the challenging behavior, what's the purpose of the behavior, and then how might we respond to the behavior. That's all encompassed in the idea of hypothesis statements. So there's an example right here. It says, in group play situations, outside play during centers, Tim uses verbal aggression We define that as threats. Physical aggression, defined as hitting, pushing, kicking, and punching, and property destruction, throwing or banging toys, to obtain toys and or join play. When this occurs, the peer relinquishes the desired toy and leaves the play area, and or an adult intervenes and provides Tim with excessive negative attention. So that hypothesis statement, if we look back here, the triggers are group play situations, right? We've clearly established that in group play situations, Tim uses verbal, physical, and property destruction. Those are the types of aggressions, and we define them in very clear, specific ways. Responses that maintain that behavior. Children leave the play area, or an adult intervenes and provides Tim with excessive negative attention. And so the purpose of the behavior was stated up in the middle: to obtain toys and or join play. So you see how that's all kind of woven in here in this hypothesis statement. If you need to think a little more deeply about hypothesis statements, you might think in terms of what would make this challenging behavior stop. That might help you unpack kind of what's the function here. Data collection, if you don't know, after one round of ABC or this other type of logging, collect more data. It is important to say that some challenging behaviors may have the same form. So you might see the same type of behavior occurring in different contexts to serve multiple functions, right? So sometimes the challenging behavior might begin with one function and then continue to serve another function. So an example is like the first video that we saw with the fella making the noise and coming over to the other children. Initially, he might have been trying to get their attention to interplay, right? But if he continued in the block center, rolling around, destroying property, making that noise, I would say that he was trying to gain the attention of the teachers or other people in the room, not just the children in that space. So it can start as one thing and then kind of shift. Or you may see, as I said, the same behavior happening to serve multiple functions. But anyways, out of all of this, the plan and the hope is that you can design a behavior support plan that will include some of those suggestions, like what you're thinking through in your own behavior analysis assignment. You're going to make recommendations, right, for caregivers in the classroom, caregivers in the home, all the people who interact with this child when we design the behavior support plan. And then implementation of the plan. And this kind of brings us back to square one, where as we're implementing the recommendations, we have to monitor, evaluate, and that's going to come from more data collection, right? Because we need to know, is this working? So we're going to make sure that we're keeping track of the behavior. Are the behaviors subsiding? Sometimes behaviors get worse before they get better. All of that stuff, though, comes from being on the same page with implementation and then collecting data. And then as we see things shifting, we have to kind of go back in and refine our plan. Do we need to do more of this, maybe less of this, because this seems to be exacerbating the behavior, that type of thinking. The good news with all of this is that as a caregiver of young children, you're not doing this work alone, right? You will have support of other people that work in the classroom. You will hopefully have the support, or at least the enlistment of the family. You should have administrative support, sometimes paraprofessional support. So this is not work that is done in isolation. And oftentimes, we do see really, really beneficial outcomes for children by doing this level of kind of intensive observation and intervention with them when necessary. Does anyone have specific questions about any of this stuff now that we've gone through it a bit more? Okay, so you should have what you need to complete the assignment for this week. That's the only thing you have to do. We will meet next week, and then if you want to make a note while you're here, I'll remind you about this next time we come together. But on April 5th, which is not next week, but the following, we will not have a synchronous class call on Tuesday. There is some asynchronous material posted for you. I'm not going to be here on that day. So go ahead and make a note of that if you want. And otherwise, that is all that I have for today. I will see you all next week on Tuesday.
Thank you, Professor Carter.
Thank you all. Have good weeks.